My name is Mia Preston. I'm 30 years old, a critical care nurse who works 12-hour shifts until my spine feels like it's breaking. I chose this job because I wanted to be useful. Last Tuesday, right after I walked into the hospital chapel, my mother grabbed the microphone in front of 23 relatives and announced with a proud smile, "After 30 years of being completely worthless to this family, my daughter Mia is finally doing something useful. She's giving her kidney to save her brother." The room erupted in applause. She had never asked me. She had simply decided for me. Then the doctor walked in holding a thick manila envelope. My father shot up so fast his chair slammed violently against the wall behind him. He already knew what was inside, and what the doctor said next turned that so-called family blessing into the moment my entire life exploded. Before I take you back to show you exactly how we got to that chapel, please take a moment to like and subscribe. Tell me in the comments, where are you watching from right now, and what time is it? I love reading every single one. Now, let me take you back. Because what happened in that chapel didn't start on Tuesday. It started the year my brother Liam was first admitted to the hospital, when I was 10 and he was 7. In a kitchen that smelled like burnt coffee, and the lavender soap my mother kept on the windowsill above the sink. I remember standing next to the refrigerator on Birchfield Drive while my mother leaned against the counter and cried into a dish towel. She wasn't crying for me. She was crying about Liam's first kidney panel, the one that came back with numbers she didn't understand but kept repeating to my father like they were a prayer. She'd been on the phone all morning, the hospital, the insurance company. Her sister Donna, who brought over a casserole that nobody ate. Then she looked at me. "Honey, some people are born to take care of others," she said. Her voice was warm, the warmth she reserved for speeches. "That's a gift, Mia. God gave you that gift." I wanted to ask what gift God had given Liam. I wanted to ask what was left for me when the giving was done. But her eyes were wet, and her mascara was running, and I was 10 years old. And the hook in her words caught before I could pull it free. "I can't do this alone," she said. She pressed the dish towel to her eyes and held it there. "Your father. Well, you know your father." I did know my father. Craig Preston, 56 now, was an accountant who spoke in numbers and silences. He'd say more to his filing cabinet than to anyone at the dinner table. But he was the one who drove me to every annual checkup without fail. He never missed a single one, not 1 year from the time I was small. He'd sit in the waiting room reading the same wily accounting manual with the cracked white spine, flipping pages until they called my name. I thought that was love. I thought showing up was enough. That night, I washed the dishes she'd left in the sink. Liam's sippy cup, 2 cereal bowls, a coffee mug with a faded church logo. I dried each one and put it back exactly where it belonged. I was 10 years old and I'd already decided, if I couldn't be the one they worried about, I'd be the one they counted on. The pattern took shape over the next 6 years. My mother had a system. She'd tear me down in public, and my father would find me afterward and smooth the edges just enough to keep me from leaving. Thanksgiving, 2012. I was 16. Christine, I still called her mom then, stood at the head of the dining table and told Aunt Donna and Grandma Beverly and 11 other relatives that I was going through a difficult phase. Difficult, meaning I'd asked to spend Christmas with a friend's family instead of ours. "Not like Liam," she said. She touched Liam's shoulder the way she touched expensive fabric, possessively, admiringly. "Liam fights. Liam tries. But Mia, well, we're family, honey, and family shows up." I set my fork down. I walked to my room. I sat on the bed with my fists in my lap and stared at the red numbers on my alarm clock. 14 minutes later, I know because I counted every one, my father came in. He sat on the edge of my mattress and stared at the opposite wall. "She's frustrated," he said. His voice was flat, the way it always was. No inflection. No warmth. Just the sound of information being delivered. She doesn't mean it, Mia. I noticed, even at 16, that he never said she was wrong. That word was not in his vocabulary when it came to Christine. He had frustrated. He had doesn't mean it. He had, your mother has her reasons. He did not have wrong. Just give her time, he said. She'll come around. I nodded. He squeezed my shoulder once. The same pressure every time, like a calibrated instrument, and left. I believed him. I stayed. This was the rhythm of my house. She broke. He mended. I stayed. When I was 20, I got accepted into a nursing program in London, St. Thomas's Hospital, 2-year exchange, full funding. I remember holding the letter in the kitchen on Birchfield Drive, the same kitchen, the same counter where my mother had cried about Liam a decade earlier. For the first time in years, I felt something that didn't require permission from anyone else. Hope. My father found me that evening. He leaned in the doorway. His spot. Always the doorway. Never fully in the room. And folded his arms. Your mother can't handle Liam's appointments alone. I need you here, Mia. You're the only one she listens to. 8 words from Craig Preston was a speech. I called London that Friday and declined the placement. My father stood in the hallway while I made the call, his back against the wall, his face blank. When I hung up, he said, "You did the right thing." I mistook his relief for pride. He'd been careful with me since I was 7. That blood test he ordered when I was in 2nd grade, the one he called an anemia check. He drove me to the lab on Granger Street, the one in the strip mall next to the dry cleaners. He held my hand the whole time the phlebotomist drew 3 vials. His grip was tight. I thought he was nervous for me. I thought his handshaking meant he cared. I enrolled at the state school 40 minutes from home instead. I did my clinicals at 3 different hospitals and specialized in critical care because it was the hardest thing they'd let me do. Because somewhere in the marrow of my decision-making was a belief that if something didn't cost me, it didn't count. I graduated 2nd in my class. My mother didn't come to the ceremony. She said Liam had an appointment that couldn't be moved. My father came. He sat in the 3rd row and clapped with both hands flat. The way you'd clap for someone else's child at a school play. Politely. Dutifully. I moved into a studio apartment on Calloway Street, 14 miles from Birchfield Drive. Close enough to drive home for Liam's Tuesday appointments. Close enough that when Christine called at midnight to say Liam was vomiting blood, I could be there in 19 minutes. Close enough that I never really left. I started at Ridgeway Memorial. Night shifts, 12 hours, the ICU unit where the sickest patients went when everything else had failed. I was good at it. Not because I was brilliant, but because I was trained to absorb other people's emergencies without flinching. My childhood had been a residency in crisis management. I just didn't know the patient was me. When I was 22, my father sat in the waiting room at Mercy General for 3 hours during my annual checkup. The same Wiley manual on his lap, the spine cracked white from 2 decades of reading. When the nurse came out holding my results in a manila folder, he stood up before I did. "I'll take those," he said. I laughed. "Dad, I'm 22. He took the papers anyway. I watched him flip through the pages. His thumb paused on one section. I noticed his eyes move left to right, then back to the top of the page. The way you reread something that matters. The header on that page, upside down from where I stood, said Renal Function Panel. "Everything looks good," he said. He closed the folder and put it into his briefcase. Not mine. His. I walked out thinking, at least he cares. At least one of them shows up. He drove me to every checkup for 22 years. He kept every result. He never let me hold my own file. I didn't ask why. I was useful. And being useful meant not asking questions. Last Tuesday morning, I was 4 hours into a shift at Ridgeway Memorial. A different hospital from St. Bartholomew's, where Liam had been admitted, when my phone buzzed. "Mom, we're having a little gathering for Liam at the chapel," she said. Her voice had that brightness she used for church fundraisers and PTA benefit auctions. Practice generosity. "Just family." "What kind of gathering?" "Oh, prayers, support." "Donna's bringing extra chairs. 23 should be enough." 23 chairs for just family. I hung up and called my aunt. "Oh, honey," Donna said. She has this way of starting sentences she doesn't want to finish. Trails off mid-thought, hedges, circles. "Well, your mom told us you'd agreed to donate. We're all just coming to support you." I hadn't agreed, my mother had announced. I told my charge nurse I needed the afternoon off, drove the 31 miles to St. Bartholomew's, walked into the chapel with no idea what I was about to find, only a growing certainty that I was walking into a script I hadn't been cast in. The chapel at St. Bartholomew's was smaller than I'd expected. 12 rows of folding chairs on beige carpet, a portable lectern near the altar, and a banner taped across the back wall. "Bless this family" in gold letters on white poster board. My mother had brought family photos and pinned them on a corkboard beside the altar table. Liam at 8, holding a soccer trophy. Liam's first communion in a white shirt 2 sizes too big. My parents' wedding, 1995, 5 months before I was conceived. A group shot from Beverly's 70th birthday party at the Elks Lodge. Every face in those photos had dark eyes, brown so deep they were nearly black. My mother, my father, Liam, Beverly, Donna, every uncle and cousin on both sides. Mine were Hazel. Mom always said I got them from Grandma Jean. Her mother, who died of a stroke in March of 1994, 2 years before I was born. Nobody alive had known Grandma Jean well enough to confirm or deny it. I'd never questioned the story. You don't question the story when every person around you tells the same version. My mother stood by the lectern adjusting the microphone height. She spotted me at the entrance and crossed the room in 4 strides. "There she is," she said. "Our brave girl." She hugged me. Her right hand closed around my wrist and pulled me toward the front row. It wasn't an embrace. It was a repositioning. "Everyone took time off work to be here, Mia. For you. For Liam." She lowered her voice, but not enough. "Don't make this about yourself, honey." I sat in the chair she pointed to. Front row center, directly facing the microphone, like a defendant facing a jury. 23 people sat behind me. I recognized most of them, Uncle Gerald and Aunt Tammy from Mechanicsville, who came to every family event and left early. My cousin Bridget, who worked at a dental office in Fairfax and always smelled like latex gloves. Beverly, my father's mother, in her wheelchair at the end of the side aisle, a blanket folded across her lap. My father sat in the last row, arms crossed, face neutral, like a man watching a presentation at work. I noticed the staging. The chairs faced the lectern, not the altar. The microphone was center stage, not off to the side the way chapel microphones usually sat. There were programs on each seat, printed programs, on cardstock, with Liam's name and the words "Family Blessing Ceremony" embossed across the top. She'd had these printed. She'd spent money on them. This wasn't a prayer circle. This was a production with an audience, a script, and one performer who hadn't been given her lines. Before she began, I noticed her phone on the empty chair to my left. The screen was lit with a text notification. To Liam, sent at 8:47 that morning. "Dad handled the tests. Results are fine. Don't worry, sweetheart." Dad handled the tests. My father wasn't a doctor. He wasn't a nurse. He was an accountant who organized other people's numbers into columns. What did "handled" mean? And if the results were fine, why had he kept every one of my medical files in his own briefcase for 22 years? I memorized the text. I didn't touch the phone. My mother held the microphone the way she held attention, with both hands, firmly, at the center of every room. She'd done this at every church luncheon, every PTA fundraiser, every Thanksgiving prayer. Christine Preston didn't attend events. She produced them. "Thank you all for coming to pray for our family," she said. She dabbed her right eye with a tissue folded into a perfect triangle. "As you know, Liam has been fighting so hard, and God has given us a way forward." She meant me. God's way was my kidney. She spent 4 minutes narrating Liam's diagnosis, the timeline, the specialist appointments, the dialysis schedule, the nights she claimed she couldn't sleep. Her voice cracked at precisely calibrated moments. I'd spent 5 years in critical care watching people fall apart for real. My mother wasn't falling apart. She was conducting. Then she said it. "After all these years, our daughter is finally doing something useful." She smiled. A few people laughed. Soft, uncertain, the sound people make when they're not sure whether they're supposed to. The word sat in the air like a held note. Useful. The word she'd been assigning me since I was 13 years old, standing at the kitchen sink after Thanksgiving, scrubbing the ceramic turkey platter while she told Donna 3 feet away, "At least Mia's useful in the kitchen." I stood up. The laughter stopped. My mother's smile locked in place. "Honey, sit down," she said. "I'm not finished." I sat down. My fingernails pressed crescents into my thighs. I sat down. But something inside me stayed standing. That Thanksgiving, I was 13. Dish soap on my hands, the platter heavy and slippery. My mother's voice carrying from the dining room as if I were furniture. I didn't cry. I didn't stop scrubbing. I just decided, in the way children decide things, silently and permanently, that my worth was in what I could give, not who I was. I'd been washing dishes for 17 years. Different dishes, same kitchen. My father touched my shoulder and guided me into the hallway. The pattern. She breaks. He mends. "She doesn't mean it like that," he said, leaning against the wall outside the chapel door. "She loves you in her own way." I waited for the rest. For, "You don't have to do this." For, "I'll talk to her." It didn't come. What came was, "I know this is hard. I'm proud of you." Proud. Not protected. A critical care nurse knows the difference between informed consent and quiet compliance. I'd watched 100 patients nod yes because they were too exhausted to say no. My father wasn't giving me a choice. He was closing a door and calling it a window. "Your mother planned this for a week," he said. "If you walk out now, I can't protect you from what she'll say." There it was. He wasn't shielding me from Christine. He was using her as the wall to keep me inside. I looked at his chest. A manila envelope. The color of hospital discharge paperwork. Peeked from the inside pocket of his gray vest. "What's that?" I said. He pushed it deeper with 2 fingers. "Oh, parking receipt." I let it go. We walked back inside. As I sat down, my grandmother Beverly reached from her wheelchair in the side aisle and touched my wrist. She didn't speak. She looked at me, then slowly at my father, then back at me. Her fingers tightened for 3 seconds. Her eyes said something her mouth didn't. Grandma Beverly had always been watching. She was always watching. Dr. Stephanie Renner pushed open the chapel's side door and walked in holding a manila envelope. The same shade, the same weight. She was Liam's nephrologist, 45, direct, the kind of doctor who made eye contact when she delivered bad news. "I'm sorry to interrupt," she said. Her voice carried. "Mr. Preston, I need to speak with you about Mia's pre-donation test results." My father shot up. The metal folding chair tipped backward and cracked against the tile like a gunshot. Every head turned. His hand flew to his vest pocket. He patted it once, twice. Then his face went white. Not pale, not flushed, white. The color I'd seen on patients coding in the ICU. I looked down. Under his overturned chair, on the tile floor, lay a manila envelope. It must have slipped from his pocket when he stood. The one he'd called a parking receipt. My mother's voice came from the lectern. What results? Everything's fine. Craig said everything was fine. Dr. Renner didn't look at Christine. She looked directly at my father. Mr. Preston, she said. Did you tell them yet? The room held still. Did you tell them yet? Not, shall we discuss this privately? Not, would you like to explain? Past tense awareness. Present tense accusation. My father had received the results days ago. He'd held them, and he'd let this entire performance continue. I bent down and picked up the envelope from the floor. My hands were steady, the same hands that started central lines and adjusted ventilator pressures at 3 a.m. I opened the flap and unfolded the pages. HLA cross-match typing. I knew how to read these. I'd reviewed hundreds during transplant evaluations. Result: incompatible. That happened in roughly 40% of family donors. It didn't necessarily mean anything. Then the next line. Genetic relationship panel. Probability of biological paternal relationship between Craig A. Preston and Mia E. Preston. 0.00%. I read it again. 0. I am a nurse. I read lab results the way most people read text messages. Quickly, fluently, without confusion. 0% meant the man 6 feet from me was not my biological father. The man who'd driven me to every checkup. Who'd held my hand through every blood draw. Who'd stood in every doorway saying stay. I looked at him. He was looking at the floor. I looked at my mother. Her mouth was open, but no sound came through. I read it aloud. Flat. Clinical. The way I'd read a chart to an attending at 4 a.m. This says I'm not biologically related to this family. I held the paper against my leg. Who am I? My mother gripped the microphone stand with both hands. This is a mistake, she said. Labs make mistakes, Mia. Craig, tell them it's a mistake. Tell them. She was staring at my father. He was staring at nothing. I noticed what she didn't say. She didn't say, "Of course she's your daughter, Craig." She didn't say, "That's impossible." She said, "Tell them it's a mistake." As if the mistake was in the telling. "Mom," I said. "Whose daughter am I?" She wheeled on my father and her composure cracked like plaster. "You told them?" Not, "How could this happen?" You told them. She already knew. She'd known for 30 years. And she thought my father had been the one to reveal it. The chapel erupted into whispers. Uncle Gerald leaned forward with his elbows on his knees. Tammy put her hand over her mouth. Bridget was staring at her phone like she wanted to disappear into it. The room had the feeling of a courtroom after a guilty verdict. Not silence, exactly, but a collective intake of breath that no one wanted to release. Donna stood up slowly in the 4th row. "Christine," she said. "What are you saying?" My father spoke. 5 words in his flat, level voice. "I didn't tell anyone." The room understood. He didn't tell anyone, which meant he'd known. She'd known. And neither of them knew the other had been keeping the same secret. I turned toward the chapel door. I didn't run. At the threshold, I looked back once. My father had Christine by the upper arm and was steering her toward the side hallway. I heard his voice, the one I'd listened to for 30 years, the one that never rose, never sharpened, never commanded anything, except now it did. "Control yourself. Now." Christine tried to pull free. "Don't you touch." "You want them to hear this?" Flat. Quiet. A closing statement. She stopped talking. I stood in that doorway, and something rearranged itself inside my chest. My father was not the weak, passive man I'd believed in for 3 decades. He wasn't afraid of Christine. He managed her. The dynamic I'd watched my entire life, she attacks, he soothes, was not dysfunction. It was choreography. And he was leading. He had always been leading. Every time he'd said, "Your mother has her reasons," in that flat, affectless voice, he wasn't explaining her behavior. He was narrating a story he'd authored. I walked into the hallway, leaned against the wall next to the hand sanitizer dispenser. The lab results were in my right hand. The parking receipt envelope, the real one, the one that had fallen from his vest, was in the other. I closed my eyes and let the pieces connect. The envelope he'd hidden. The text on Christine's phone. Dad handled the tests, which meant he'd intercepted the medical process, positioned himself between the hospital and the truth, chosen what to share and what to bury. The way he'd gripped Christine's arm and said, "Control yourself." Not a plea, but a directive from someone holding leverage. 3 days of secrecy didn't produce that kind of authority. That was decades. That was architecture. If my father had been hiding the lab results since Monday, what else had he been hiding? And how far back did the blueprint go? I pulled my car keys from my jacket. I wasn't going to my apartment on Callaway Street. I was going to 14 Birchfield Drive, the house where I grew up, the house with the filing cabinet in my father's office. Have you ever been the useful one in your family? The one they only call when they need something? Tell me. I want to know I'm not alone. On the way to Birchfield, I stopped at the Sunoco on Route 9 and sat in my car with the engine running. I called Donna. She picked up on the first ring. Her voice was shaking. "Mia, are you okay? Where did you—" "Donna, did you know?" "No, I swear, I didn't. I never thought—" "Did you ever notice anything?" A pause, then quieter. "Your mother told me something once. Years ago. She said your father had some kind of health scare about you when you were little. She said he handled it." I asked what it was, and she said it wasn't my concern. Another pause. I never asked again. I sat with that. A health scare. Handled. The same word from the text message. My father had been handling things about me for longer than 3 days. Longer than 3 years. "Thank you, Donna," I said and hung up. The spare key was under the third flagstone from the porch steps, where my father had put it in 2011 after I lost my house key for the second time. The house was dark. Everyone was still at the hospital. His office was at the back of the first floor. A 10 by 12 room that smelled like old paper and toner. A desk with a green banker's lamp. A wooden chair with a cracked leather seat. One window facing the backyard, blinds closed. And against the far wall, a gray steel filing cabinet with 4 drawers, the kind you'd see in any accountant's office in any suburb in America. I'd been in this room 1,000 times growing up, doing homework at his desk, borrowing pens, looking for tape. I'd never paid attention to the cabinet. It was furniture. It was background. Not anymore. I opened the first drawer. Tax returns, organized by year, tabbed with colored labels, going back to 2004. Every return filed correctly, every receipt stapled in order. This was who my father was, a man who organized chaos into rows and columns, who believed that if you labeled something correctly, you controlled it. Second drawer. Insurance documents, mortgage papers for 14 Birchfield Drive, car titles for the Camry and the Accord, a homeowner's policy renewal from State Farm dated last January. Third drawer, labeled in my father's neat block print, family, medical. Inside were 2 manila folders. One said MIA. One said Liam. Liam's folder was thick. 3 inches of specialist reports from Dr. Renner, nephrologist consult notes going back to 2019, blood panels with highlighted abnormals, insurance pre-authorization letters, A printout of the UNOS transplant waiting list criteria. My father had organized it chronologically, with tabs for each year. Mine was thin, 12 pages, annual checkup summaries from Mercy General, blood work panels, always the same tests. A single-page immunization record from 2002, stamped by the Fairfax County Health Department. I held the two folders side by side. Liam's was the weight of a small textbook. Mine was the weight of a pamphlet. I had been a line item in his filing system. Liam had been a portfolio. The fourth drawer was locked. A small brass lock, the kind you'd buy at a hardware store. In 30 years of living in this house, I had never seen my father lock a single thing. Not the garage, not the attic, not the storage closet under the stairs, not even his briefcase. Just this drawer. While looking for the key, I pulled the second drawer open again and found a folder I'd missed. Life Insurance, Guardian Whole Life. Policy number GWL-1187620, issued 2003 through Mutual of Omaha. Primary beneficiary, Christine Preston. Secondary beneficiaries, Liam Preston, $200,000. Mia Preston, $25,000. Same household, same parents on paper. One child worth 8 times the other. Even on paper, I was worth less. I found the key inside the spine of a book on his nightstand. Intermediate Accounting, Kiso and Vagant, 14th edition. The same book he'd carried to every waiting room for 20 years. I'd seen it 1,000 times. I'd never once opened it. The lock turned with a click. The fourth drawer held a single folder thinner than mine, with a handwritten label in blue ballpoint, 1999. Inside, a DNA paternity test. Client, Craig A. Preston. Subject, Mia E. Preston. Date of birth, June 14, 1996. Laboratory, GenePath Diagnostics, 4400 Cox Road, Richmond, Virginia. Date of report, March 12, 1999. Result, excluded. Probability of paternity, 0%. March 1999. I was 3 years old. Liam was born that September, which meant my father discovered I wasn't his the same year he had a child who was. The same year he gained a son, he learned the daughter wasn't his. And he stayed. He reorganized. He relabeled. My father didn't find out 3 days ago. He'd known for 27 years. I stood in his office and reread the date until the numbers stopped swimming. I thought about every year that followed 1999. 27 years of annual checkups where he sat in waiting rooms with a book he'd already memorized, tracking my health the way he tracked tax deductions, methodically, annually, without attachment. 27 years of blocking opportunities that would take me out of reach. London at 20. Denver at 26. Every exit ramp closed with a specific practical excuse. 27 years of walking into my room after Christine shredded me and saying, "She doesn't mean it." Administering exactly enough comfort to keep me from packing a bag. Never enough truth to let me understand why I should. 27 years of standing in doorways saying, "I'm proud of you," not because he was proud, but because pride was the cheapest currency he could spend to keep me in the building. Available, on call, filed. He wasn't weak. He was never passive. He was the architect of a 30-year structure, and I was the load-bearing wall he'd never told about the termites. On the shelf above his desk, next to a row of tax code manuals, I saw the memory jar he'd given me for my 18th birthday. A mason jar filled with river stones and folded slips of paper, each one a family memory he'd written by hand. I'd cried when he gave it to me. I'd kept it on my nightstand for 2 years, but the jar wasn't in my apartment. It was here, in his office, on his shelf. He'd either taken it back or never truly given it away. I photographed the 1999 test, both pages, front and back. I photographed the handwritten label. I put the folder back, locked the drawer, slid the key into the book spine. I put everything back exactly where he left it, just like he'd put me back every time I tried to leave. She found the filing cabinet. She found the lock. But what do you think Craig kept in a drawer he'd sealed for 27 years? Drop your guess, I'll wait. I sat in my car in the St. Bartholomew's parking lot at 5:40 the next morning and opened the photographs on my phone. The 1999 test. I zoomed to the bottom of the last page. Below the laboratory's signature, in blue ballpoint ink, my father's handwriting, the same cramped block print from every tax return, every label, every note he'd ever left on the kitchen counter. C. Doesn't know I tested. Keep. C. Christine. He'd ordered the paternity test without telling her. My mother's affair was a secret she believed only she carried, and my father had held the proof for 27 years, silently, deliberately, not out of forgiveness or heartbreak, out of leverage. He stayed because her secret gave him power. I scrolled through the photos. I thought about the checkups he never missed, the blood test when I was 7, the anemia check at the Granger Street lab. Had he been tracking my kidney function since childhood? Had he always known I wasn't a match for Liam, but kept performing the ritual so I'd stay close, stay enrolled in the family, stay useful? I remembered every time I'd tried to leave. London at 20. The roof needs fixing, I can't do it alone. My apartment at 23. Your mother's blood pressure is dangerous, I need you nearby. Denver at 26. Liam's appointments overlap with mine. Can you drive him Tuesdays? Every time, a specific reason. Every time, a rope with a name stitched into it. 27 years of rope. The question that mattered wasn't who my biological father was. That could wait. The question was, who designed my life? I sat for 5 more minutes. Then I stepped out of the car. My father was in the 3rd floor waiting area. 6 a.m. He sat in a plastic chair with a paper cup of coffee gone cold. I could see the film on the surface. He was wearing yesterday's shirt. He looked smaller than I'd ever seen him. I stood. He sat. For the first time in 30 years, I was looking down at him. I went home last night, I said. Your filing cabinet has 4 drawers. 3 open, 1 locked. He didn't move. Not his hands, not his eyes. March 1999, I said. I was 3. 8 seconds of silence. I counted them. Then he spoke. 2 words, in the voice I'd trusted my entire life. The flat one, the one with no edges. I stayed. You stayed to use me. He stood up. He was taller again. He looked at me the way he looked at columns that didn't balance, with irritation, not sorrow. I kept this family together. You kept me in a drawer. I held up my phone, the photograph of the 1999 paternity test, date and result, clearly visible. He looked at the screen. I watched understanding arrive. What are you going to do? He said. What you should have done 27 years ago, I said. Tell the truth. I walked past him into the hospital. On the way to the elevator, I passed the 3rd floor nurse station. Habit made me glance at the charts. I was a nurse, and nurse stations were where I oriented myself in any hospital. Liam's chart was on the counter, open to the family history intake form. Craig had filled it out 2 weeks earlier before the pre-donation workup began. I stopped. Under siblings, in my father's block print, Mia Preston, sister. No known medical conditions. Sister. He'd written sister on a medical form 14 days ago. He'd known for 27 years that I wasn't Liam's biological sibling. He'd known the donation would never be approved once the genetic panel came back. And he'd still filled in sister and signed his name at the bottom of the page. He'd used me on paper the same way he'd used me in person. Filed under family, categorized as available, submitted to the system as something I never was. I kept walking. I found Donna in the second floor waiting area. She was sitting alone in a row of blue plastic chairs, holding a bottle of water she hadn't opened and a packet of tissues she'd already gone through. Her mascara had migrated to her temples. She looked like she'd aged 5 years in 12 hours. She stood when she saw me. "Mia," she said. She stopped. Started over. "Honey, I mean, I'm so sorry. I had no idea your mother was. I just never would've, if I had known." She was doing the thing she always did. Circling, hedging, starting 3 sentences for every one she finished. "You sat in that chapel," I said. "You watched her stand at that microphone and call me useless in front of 23 people. You saw my face. And you never asked if I was okay." "It wasn't my place, Mia. She's my sister. I didn't think it was. It wasn't anyone's place to ask. That's how it worked, isn't it? Nobody's place. Nobody's business. Nobody's problem. 30 years of nobody asking and everybody knowing. Because you did know, Donna. You told me on the phone tonight. Mom mentioned a health scare about me and you never followed up. You chose not to know. That's not innocence. That's participation." Donna sat down slowly. The shredded tissue in her lap looked like snow. She was crying again. Quiet, steady tears, the kind that don't ask for comfort. I stood over her and felt something I hadn't expected. Not anger, not satisfaction. Sadness. Because Donna wasn't evil. She was just the person who'd agreed to look away, and looking away had been enough to keep the machine running. "I don't need you to talk to Christine," I said. "I don't need you to explain or mediate or fix anything. What I need is for you to sit in that chapel tomorrow morning and watch. Can you do that?" She looked up at me. Her chin was trembling. "Yes," she said. I walked away. That night, close to 10, I went back to the chapel alone. The chairs were still in rows. The banner, "Bless this family," hung from the wall. The lectern had been pushed aside, but the microphone was still clipped to it. I walked to the front. I stood where my mother had stood. I looked out at the empty rows, at the chair in the front row, right side, where she'd placed me yesterday like an exhibit in her own trial. Tomorrow, I would stand here. But I wasn't going to bless anyone. I slept in my car in the parking garage, set my alarm for 5:30. Before the sun came up, I went to Liam's room on the 4th floor. He was awake, scrolling his phone, the dialysis port taped to the inside of his left arm. The monitors beeped their patient rhythm. The sound I heard 8 hours a day at Ridgeway. The sound of a body being measured. He'd lost weight since his last admission. His collarbone pushed through the hospital gown like a wire hanger. He looked up when I came in. His face did something complicated. Relief, and shame, and fear passing through it like weather. "I didn't ask for this either, Mia," he said. His voice was hoarse. He set his phone face down on the mattress. "I didn't know about the blessing until Mom called me that morning. I didn't know about any of it." I believed him. Liam had been sick since he was 7. He'd grown up inside the machine of his own treatment. Appointments, medications, dialysis, the transplant list. And somewhere along the way, he had learned that other people's sacrifices were part of his medical plan, not because he was cruel, because that's what they'd taught him. "I know," I said. He looked at me for a long time. The fluorescent light turned his skin gray. He looked 10 years older than 27. The IV pole next to his bed had 3 bags hanging from it. I could read the labels from where I stood. Saline, a phosphate binder, an antibiotic. His kidneys were failing and his family was falling apart, and he was lying in a bed he couldn't leave. "Mia," he said, "can I ask you something?" I waited. "You're still my sister, right? I mean, that doesn't change?" And there it was. Even in an apology, The first real question wasn't, "Are you okay?" It was, "Are you still mine? Still categorized? Still on file?" It wasn't malice. It was programming. He'd been raised to see me as the giving tree, and he didn't know any other shape for us. "I don't know what I am, Liam." He didn't have an answer for that. His hand twitched on the blanket like he wanted to reach for me. I touched the bed rail, cold metal, not warm skin, and walked out. The chapel the next morning had 15 people instead of 23. 8 didn't come back. My mother stood at the front in a navy dress I'd never seen before, the microphone in her hand. My father sat in the second row, still wearing yesterday's shirt. Beverly was in her wheelchair by the side aisle. Donna sat in the last row, alone. The banner still read, "Bless this family." My mother tapped the microphone once and began. "Thank you for coming back. Yesterday was a misunderstanding. Lab errors happen. Any hospital will tell you that. Craig and I have spoken, and we want everyone to know." She paused for the kind of emphasis she'd learned from televangelists. "Mia is our daughter. She has always been our daughter. And Liam still needs our prayers. Our daughter. Possessive. Not my daughter. That would be true, but incomplete." Our conscripted my father into her version, sealed the crack, rebuilt the wall before anyone could look through it. I stood up. I did not take the microphone. 12-hour shifts in critical care had taught me how to fill a room without raising my voice. "HLA cross-match typing. Incompatible," I said. I read from the paper I'd been holding since Tuesday. "Genetic relationship panel. 0% probability of biological relationship between Craig A. Preston and Mia E. Preston." I walked to the altar table and laid the paper down. "This is not a lab error. This is a paternity test." The room shifted. I could hear it. Chairs creaking, fabric rustling, the small involuntary sounds that people make when the floor beneath them tilts. Uncle Gerald sat forward. Bridget set her phone face down on her lap. Beverly didn't move at all. My mother's smile stayed 3 seconds too long, the way a screensaver lingers before the monitor goes dark. "That's... Honey, labs make mistakes all the time. Craig, tell them." She turned to my father. Her voice pitched upward, the way it did when she was losing control of a room. "Tell them." My father said nothing. He sat in his chair with his hands on his knees, still as furniture. "One test doesn't mean anything," she said. She gripped the edge of the lectern. "I carried you for 9 months, Mia. I am your mother." She was shifting her defense. The lab error argument had failed, so she moved to biology. The one credential no test could revoke. She'd carried me. She'd delivered me. That was supposed to settle it. I took out my phone. I opened the photograph. I turned the screen toward the room and enlarged the date until it was readable from the third row. "March 12, 1999, I said. "This is a DNA paternity test, ordered by Craig Preston. Subject, Mia Preston, age 3, 27 years ago." I let the number sit in the room. It wasn't a lab error yesterday. It's been a secret he's kept since before Liam was born. I watched 15 faces recalculate. 27 years. That was longer than most of their marriages. Longer than some of their children had been alive. I could see the arithmetic happening behind their eyes. Every family dinner, every holiday, every phone call where Christine had said, "We're fine," and Craig had said nothing at all. Donna stood up in the back row. She looked at my mother the way you look at someone you realize you've never actually seen. 30 years, Donna said. Her voice was raw. "You looked me in the eye for 30 years. Donna, sit down." "No." Donna's voice cracked, but she didn't fold. "I should have asked questions 30 years ago. I'm not sitting down anymore." I turned to face my father. The room was quiet in the way hospitals are quiet at 3 a.m. Not peaceful, but held. "You found out I wasn't yours when I was 3 years old," I said. You stayed. Not because you loved me, because Mom's secret gave you control over her. I held up one hand and counted on my fingers. And I was the backup plan. Annual checkups to track my kidneys, blocking my study abroad so I'd stay close, comforting me every single time she tore me apart. Just enough so I'd stay grateful, stay available. My voice broke for the first time. I let it. I didn't look away from him. You kept me the way you keep files, organized, locked, accessible when needed. My father stood up. He stepped into the aisle. For the first time in my life, his flat voice cracked open. Not like sadness, but like something pressurized finally rupturing. I stayed, he said. His finger pointed at me. His hand shook. I raised you. I drove you to every single appointment. I held your hand when you were scared. I did that. His face was red, his jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscles jumping under his skin. You don't get to erase 27 years because of a piece of paper. The room was watching a man they'd known as quiet, measured, invisible, shouting. The transformation was almost more shocking than the secret itself. Craig Preston did not raise his voice. Craig Preston did not point fingers. Craig Preston sat in back rows and nodded. Except now he was standing in the center aisle with his arm outstretched, shaking, and every person in that room could see that his defense, I stayed, was not love. It was inventory management. I looked at him. I made my voice quiet. I made it level. I used his voice. The flat one. The one with no warmth and no edges. The voice I'd spent 30 years trusting because I thought it meant safety. You held my hand at that blood test when I was 7, I said. I thought you were nervous for me. I paused. You were checking if I was still useful. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then, from the side aisle, Beverly spoke. Her voice was clear. No tremor. No hesitation. The only words I would hear from her that day. Maybe the last words I'd ever hear from her. He told me once, when you were small. She was looking straight ahead. I told him to do the right thing. He said he would. She turned her head and looked at my father. You didn't. The room absorbed it. Beverly Preston, 78 years old, wheelchair-bound, the woman who'd sat silently through every family dinner and holiday and hospital visit for as long as anyone could remember, had just delivered a verdict that no lab test or locked drawer could overturn. She had known. She had told him to do the right thing. He had promised. And for 27 years, the promise sat in the same silence as everything else in this family. Buried, maintained, ignored. Christine sank into her chair, not dramatically. She didn't collapse or cry out. She just sat, the way a building settles when the foundation cracks. My father sat too. His hands went to his knees. His face was blank again, the flat expression restored. But this time, it didn't look like control. It looked like a man who'd run out of columns to put the numbers in. I was the only one standing. 15 people sat in folding chairs in a hospital chapel beneath a gold-lettered banner that said, "Bless this family," and not one of them moved. Not one of them spoke. The blessing was over. It had been over for 27 years. It just took this long for anyone to say it out loud. My mother's voice followed me to the door. Mia, please. We can talk about this. We're still family, Mia. Honey. I didn't turn. I walked through the chapel door and it closed behind me. Her voice faded the way a television sounds from another room, present, but no longer relevant. I walked down the hallway past the nurse station, past the elevators, past the lobby with its potted ferns and framed watercolors of sailboats. I pushed through the front entrance and stood on the concrete steps in the morning air. It was March. It was cold. I didn't have a coat. I was not walking away from my family. I was walking toward myself. And for the first time in 30 years, the direction I was heading was mine. 3 weeks later, I transferred to the critical care unit at Ridgeway Memorial. New schedule, 3 12s a week, Tuesday through Thursday. New ID badge with a photo where I looked tired but clear-eyed. I found a one-bedroom apartment on Callaway Street, 14 miles from Birchfield Drive, on the second floor of a building with thin walls and a laundry room that smelled like fabric softener. I signed the lease on a Monday afternoon. The landlord asked for an emergency contact. I wrote my own name. On Wednesday, I sat in the Ridgeway break room eating a turkey sandwich and blocked Christine Preston and Craig Preston from my phone. It took 2 seconds each. 2 taps, 2 confirmations, and 30 years of calls that began with, "We need you," and ended with my car keys in my hand, went silent. Donna sent flowers to my apartment the following week. White roses. No card except, "Thinking of you." D. I put them on the kitchen counter. I didn't call her back. I wasn't ready to decide what Donna was to me yet. She'd stood up in the chapel. She'd also sat down for 30 years before that. One message I read. It came from Liam 24 days after the chapel. "I'm on the transplant list now. A real one. I wanted you to know. I'm sorry. Not for the kidney. For never asking how you were." I didn't reply. I didn't block him. It is 11 p.m. on a Thursday, and I am standing at the scrub sink in the Ridgeway Memorial ICU. The water is warm. My hands are raw from washing, the same hands that opened a locked drawer, that held a paternity test in a room that smelled like toner, that set a piece of paper on an altar, and changed the shape of a family forever. In the mirror above the basin, I see my own face. Hazel eyes that don't match anyone I grew up with. Light brown hair that no one in the Preston family has ever had. A jaw that belongs to a man I've never met and may never look for. I used to think being useful was the same as being loved. That if I gave enough, my time, my patience, my organs, the literal tissue of my body, someone would finally see me. Not my kidneys, not my blood type, not my renal function panel, not my file in a locked drawer or my name on a medical form that lied about who I was. Me, the person behind the utility. My father kept me for 27 years in a locked drawer, filed under available. My mother put me on a stage and called me useful. Neither of them ever once asked how I was. Not on a Tuesday when I was 10 and washed their dishes. Not on a Friday when I was 20 and gave up London. Not in a chapel where 23 people applauded the donation of a body part I'd never offered. If you've ever been the useful one who finally stopped giving, I see you. What boundary did you set that changed everything? Share it below. So I'm asking myself now, and the answer is, I'm still here. And I'm keeping every part of me. You are not a spare part for the people who were supposed to love you whole.